For decades, we've known that air pollution can harm your lungs, increase your risk of heart disease, and even shorten your lifespan. But what's only recently begun to surface, and far more quietly, is that smog isn't just a respiratory issue. It's a psychological one. The very air you breathe may be warping your mood, draining your emotional resilience, and nudging you closer to depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders, especially if you live in a dense urban environment. This isn't fringe speculation anymore. It's a rapidly expanding field of study, with sobering findings. A growing number of population-based studies now suggest that exposure to ambient air pollution, particularly PM 2.5, fine particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and O2, and ozone, is correlated with higher rates of depression, generalized anxiety, bipolar disorder, and even suicide attempts. In one major study published in JAMA Psychiatry, researchers followed over 500,000 participants and found that long-term exposure to PM 2.5 significantly increased the risk of developing depression, even after adjusting for income, education, and other social variables. Another study using data from a UK biobank linked both depression and anxiety to exposure to NO2 and PM 2.5, with the strongest effects in urban areas with heavy traffic. The implication is clear. The psychological price of living in a smoggy city may be just as steep as the physical one. And these aren't small effects. In some studies, the increase in depression risk linked to air pollution exposure is comparable to the increase you'd see from chronic stress or low socioeconomic status. This means that simply living in a polluted environment might be enough to tip the scale for someone who is already vulnerable, turning manageable stress into clinical depression or occasional worry into paralyzing anxiety. But what's the mechanism? How exactly does bad air lead to bad mood? It comes down to the biological wreckage air pollution causes in the brain. Inhaled particles don't just stop in the lungs. They enter the bloodstream and travel to the brain, where they trigger a cascade of neuroinflammatory reactions. Microglia, the brain's immune cells, become hyperactive. Cytokines are released. Blood vessels constrict. And the resulting inflammation and oxidative stress interfere with the brain's ability to regulate neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, the very chemicals that stabilize mood, motivation, and pleasure. At the same time, pollution may damage the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, regions crucial for emotional regulation and resilience. In functional MRI scans, people exposed to higher pollution levels show altered brain activity in areas linked to fear, reward, and decision-making. It's as if the brain is rewired by chronic exposure to environmental stress, leaving individuals more reactive, less optimistic, and more prone to mood instability. Even short-term spikes in pollution can have immediate emotional effects. Multiple studies have found that hospital admissions for psychiatric emergencies, including panic attacks and suicidal ideation, increase on days with elevated pollution levels. You don't need a lifetime of exposure to feel it. Sometimes just one particularly smoggy week is enough to push people to the edge. And like most things in environmental health, the burden doesn't fall equally. Low-income and marginalized communities, already more likely to live near highways, factories, and other pollution sources, are also more likely to experience the compounding effects of environmental stress, economic pressure, and reduced access to mental health care. It's environmental injustice with an emotional toll. If you're poor and urban, the air is more toxic, and so is the experience of simply trying to hold yourself together. The cruel irony? Many mental health symptoms triggered or worsened by air pollution, fatigue, irritability, lack of focus, loss of motivation, are often dismissed as laziness or weakness. People blame themselves. But what if the problem isn't internal at all? What if it's in the atmosphere, slow dripping into your brain through every breath you take? So while we talk about self-care, therapy, mindfulness, and medication, we rarely talk about the invisible cloud that surrounds so many of us, and the mounting evidence that it's quietly altering brain chemistry city by city. You can meditate all you want, but if your neurons are swimming in a haze of neurotoxic particles, there's only so much deep breathing can do. The takeaway is as urgent as it is overlooked. Clean air is mental health care. And right now, millions are being forced to inhale environmental triggers for depression and anxiety every single day, often with no idea why they feel so persistently low, agitated, or disconnected. The link between pollution and mood isn't just academic, it's personal. It's the hidden variable in the equation of your emotional life. So if you find yourself feeling more anxious, more down, more mentally foggy in the city than you do in the countryside, you're not imagining things. It's not all in your head, it's in your air.